Hogstye.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Hogstye offseason. It's been a fun week if you are a Washington fan. I still can't just say Commanders. Washington fan's the best I'm going to do for a while.
I will never.
You'll never do it. You'll never do it.
Do it. I will. I usually in my columns I'll put Washington C words and put a line through a strike through it, and then I'll put Washington football team, Washington Redskins.
Yeah. You love to do your strike throughs. Somebody taught Steve a little HTML, I guess, and he had too much.
No. Word has an easy way to do it without HTML.
I know. Well, welcome everybody. We are now in the off season. It's been a heck of a week for Washington. Of course, the top story we're going to talk about today is going to be Eric Bieniemy and that hiring. We have some other stuff we got to cover because we got to talk about some draft stuff and our free agency previews that. The stuff we like to cover each week so that you're not overwhelmed with either of those events. We like to go in depth a little bit. But of course, we'll also talk about some XFL, right? Because that happened again.
I have a quick XFL story.
Oh, do you?
Or not? Yeah. So the Houston Roughnecks,
right,
apparently are an outstanding XFL team. I did not know
They're a very
this,
popular one, yes.
But immediately across the street from my office last Friday, as in 150 feet from the door, was the Houston Roughnecks rally.
Oh, really?
Season opening rally. So I went to this because it was literally 150 feet from the front door of the building. And there was, 50, 60 people there or something. It was, what do you
Sounds
expect?
about right.
But it had Wade Phillips was the coach. Who knew? He was there, gave a nice little speech. The crowd was, excited about their team. For those who were, it wasn't like the drug addicts on the corner. It was like real. I mean, those guys were there too. But it was some legitimate fans there, and they had a couple.
Drug addicts can be fans of the XFL too. They're very embracing.
But true. But I don't think these particular drug addicts weren't. But there were like 50 or 60 legitimate Roughnecks clad fans there who were very excited about it. And so I was glad I went. It was kind of cool. The mayor came out and gave Wade Phillips a football it was like Wade Phillips Day or something. I don't know. So, but as a result of this, I then watched the second half of the Houston Roughnecks game on Saturday night.
Oh, good for you.
It was decent football.
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately, I missed the whole weekend of all the XFL games. I tried to catch a little bit, but I didn't get a chance to do any of it at all.
The highlight of the DC game, and I didn't go in person, but the highlight of the DC game was apparently security stole the fans' beer snake, which is a thing they do in DC where they just keep stacking beer cups on top of each other to make a giant snake in the stands. Security got mad about it and stole it. Is
somebody pouring alcohol through all these things, or is it
No, it's once you drink your beer, you put it on the stack.
Okay, so as long as they're not like pouring alcohol down somebody's mouth, why would they take the beer snake?
Because security hates fun, Steve. Anyone with a badge hates fun. That's the nature of law enforcement.
So. Was that the video? Like I saw a video clip this weekend of in the stadium. There was all this what looked like fluid was being sprayed out everywhere. Is that what you're referring to with the beer snake?
No, I don't think that.
Because I saw it.
The fans ended up stopping the game, complaining so loudly and throwing lemons on the field. Don't ask me where we got lemons. They got lemons. It was DC is quickly becoming the rowdiest fan base in the XFL for whatever that's worth. And just think, if the Washington football team or Commanders or whatever their name becomes moves back to DC, we could be the rowdiest fan base again. Just got to move it back to the city. That's all you got to do.
What was going through my head as I was watching this rally is like, man, I bet you I could get credentialed in this place in about 30 seconds if I just asked.
Oh, you absolutely could.
Yeah, they would be desperate for anybody to cover.
I mean, kind of like how I got credentialed with the arena football team.
We had an arena football team podcast for one episode, if I recall.
Yep. It did not go well.
Nobody listened, and then we gave it up.
Yep. 2 people listened. I think I was one.
Oh, I think I listened probably to back some of it. So
that was the other person.
Exactly.
All right. Well, why don't we should focus on things more important here in DC. Obviously, the Eric Bieniemy story is story number 1. Ron Rivera, you got to give credit to the team. And I know we're going to focus on some of the negative stuff that's come out. Dave, you're really fired up about some of the, Emmanuel Ocho and was it LaShawn McCoy nonsense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is a coup for Washington, I think. Eric Bieniemy, having been the offensive coordinator under Andy Reid, 2 Super Bowl rings now, you got to think it's an upgrade, right? No matter what. It's an upgrade from, son of Norv. So that alone is a big win. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to get into here. I think we'll just dive right in. What's the offense going to be like now? All those kind of questions come into play that we kind of touched on last week, Steve, you and I.
Yeah.
But let's start with the bad and get that out of the way because it is entertaining nonetheless. It is like the Washington Commanders, slapped Emmanuel Ocho's mom in the face in front of him. The way he is taking this hiring somehow. He is personally offended for some reason that Eric Bieniemy is coming to DC. And then he gets, his buddy LaShawn McCoy on his show, to be his echo chamber. It was cartoonish.
Well, look, are you guys just being homers? I thought
no.
Now, I wrote a column, and I thought I was pretty balanced and fair in there because Eric Bieniemy does have some bad. It's not all good. I mean, the good side is that Bieniemy is a winner. He has 2 Super Bowl rings. He learned from the best. There's probably not a better coach than Andy Reid. He's been with him for years. The offense, Dave, you had some of the stats in your piece. I had some in my piece. Dave wrote a piece too. I mean, his running games especially have been outstanding, but maybe for 1 year, so all of that is good, but there's bad here too. And I mean, I can't totally disagree with LaShawn McCoy's concerns. His point, I mean, McCoy said, look, McCoy said, from what I heard, I watched what Dave, you texted in our group chat. I watched that piece and he's basically saying I was in the room and Bieniemy wasn't saying anything. It was always Andy Reid running everything. And so, Bieniemy really wasn't the genius behind all this. That's kind of what he was saying. It's a concern. You have to admit it's a concern. He has been with Andy Reid all this time, which is good, but he hasn't called plays. I think it is at least something to not just totally ignore and laugh off.
Well, see, I think the problem with LaShawn McCoy's comments is to go on what you were saying. I mean, even like Jamal Charles had come out when Bieniemy was a running back coach at the time. I mean, he was absolutely involved in everything on the field in terms of development and discipline, and and he held players accountable, and and that's part of what McCoy was talking about, is that he treated veterans just like anybody else, and he found that to be an issue. And one video I sent you guys when he was a running backs coach in Minnesota, and how he talked to Adrian Peterson. I was a young Adrian Peterson at the time. Bieniemy has a very old school mentality, which is what Louis Riddick was talking about too. He holds everyone accountable. He holds everyone to a very high standard. Doesn't care if you just came in the league, been in the league for 3 years, or been a vested veteran well over 5 years. He doesn't care. He's very detail oriented. He has a regiment that you need to follow. If you don't follow it, he calls you out on it, right or wrong. And that's a discipline I think that we lack in the NFL across the board to begin with at the time. But the problem I had with LaShawn McCoy making that statement is he essentially took it personal that when it wasn't just Bieniemy, Reid basically told him and said, listen, you're past your prime. You don't have it anymore. When they got to the playoffs, he was inactive for every single game. When they got to, I believe they went to Super Bowl that year too, if I'm not mistaken as well. Now, was that 2019 year was? 18?
I have to go back and look. I don't remember what year LaShawn McCoy was with the Chiefs.
But essentially, McCoy's pride was hit, and that's pretty much what Tyreek Hill even alluded to, when he made his comments, because LaShawn McCoy is the only former player from all the way back to Minnesota, all the way up to this point, that has these kind of negative comments about him. Now, there are players that will talk about how hard he was on them, but like back to Jamal Charles, you said, he learned a lot from Eric Bieniemy. And he as hard as he was on him, he learned to become a much more detailed oriented guy in practice. Why? I mean, even in your article, you even spoke to like Spencer Ware, Jamal Charles coming out of college. They weren't these high profile running backs.
I mean, look, I'm not trying to be relentlessly negative about it, but I just think we cannot be homers on this show. We have to be fair
absolutely
about it.
Not. Yeah.
And I'm not saying you are, but I mean, there is another side to this. And McCoy, I thought Acho's video was a little bit odd, but McCoy he had some points.
Which video did you watch? The one where he was on his show,
or the one
in his
ESPN
car?
show.
Okay. He recorded a very weird looking one where he was in his car.
Yeah, I watched that one from Acho, and I watched the McCoy one. He was in the studio with those radio guys, Keyshawn Johnson, somebody.
The Speak or something.
And now the other video that Dave was talking about, it was a clip that sounded like it was from what's the HBO show?
Hard Knocks.
Yeah, it looked like it was a Hard Knocks video, and in particular, it focused on an interaction between Bieniemy and Adrian Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
And Peterson was being arrogant, to be honest. Yes. And Bieniemy called him out on it. Peterson ran the wrong play, ran the wrong pattern, something. And Bieniemy says, "Well, what was the play called?" And they got into it a little bit, but the reason they got into it is that Adrian Peterson knew he was wrong. So I don't dislike that, but there's a reason that Eric Bieniemy has interviewed 16 times and never been selected for a head coaching position.
Right.
When a lot of other people under Andy Reid have. And so that's what in my column, all the good, winner, good with the players, did a lot with a bunch of guys who, those running backs you were talking about, none of them were like Adrian Peterson, top of the first round. He made something of all of them. But there's a reason why he is not a head coach. I don't know what it is. I'm not there. But it makes me wonder if McCoy has a point.
I mean, I don't think I don't take veteran players who are like mad about their career twilight very serious. Like it's going to happen to you. Like it happens to everybody in their career, no matter what their career is. Steve, at some point, you will be just not with it enough to be a great lawyer. Dave, at some point, you will not be able to work for Boeing anymore.
I will always be great. What are you talking about, Alex?
Look, I have an uncle. He was a lawyer. He went to some of the top Ivy League schools for undergrad and grad school. He very successful. He lost his fastball at some point, mentally speaking. You know what I mean? Like it just happens.
Right.
Like speak for yourself.
Unless you die young, then you won't.
Well, let's pray for that then.
Well, you're past that point.
That's true. I already wrote a column about this too. Go read it.
But it's a hard thing to hear that from people that, hey, you need to think post this career at some point.
Can you guys admit that maybe McCoy has a point?
Well, see, the part of McCoy that why I take it a little bit differently is that because with me in Philadelphia, I know the kind of player he was here. He was very selfish. He was very arrogant when he was here as well.
Talented. But yes,
very talented, absolutely. And even when you in fact, I even talked to Bobby again. Bobby again, right? Remember for last show, Bobby, Philadelphia
Bobby.
Eagle fan.
Yep.
Oh, Bobby, your friend. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
That Bobby.
Because
when I started talking about McCoy, he stopped me, and he was like, I've never liked him from day one. Never liked him because of the fact that how he was very. He was very much antithesis to anything that, the coaches have said. And the one thing that really turned him off is that when Chip Kelly came in, they didn't coalesce at all. And right away, McCoy just comes out with a statement saying that Chip Kelly doesn't like black players, just like that. It's like he makes these brash statements when he doesn't have anything that goes his way. He's known for that, and
But
he
let's
did
talk
that
about the
through. So
substance of it, though. Forget the brashness. And I think some of what McCoy was saying was he's hard on players, even star players, and it's kind of a
Right.
bit whiny. But how about the part about who's commanding the room in the offensive meetings? Andy
oh,
Reid. Who speaks
that's
who's
where
involved in
yeah,
the passing game? Not those are the things that interested me. I don't really care if he yells at players.
right, sure. Now that's where if you listen to Lewis Riddick, now I mean
Lewis
he's
Riddick
pretty
had told a different story.
yes,
Yeah.
and Lewis Riddick talked about the fact that he knows very well within that organization, and he has good ties with Andy Reid. That Bieniemy was absolutely part of play schemes and designs going to every game, scripted plays and so forth. It's just he was very much involved in all that. He doesn't understand where LaShawn McCoy comes up with that. Now,
Mhm.
granted, now keep in mind when LaShawn McCoy was there, that was only year 2 of Bieniemy being an offensive coordinator anyway. So the reins may have not been fully loosened at that time. Andy Reid probably still had full grasp of that offense in his first
Sure.
couple years
Oh, maybe.
before, you know
Well,
what I
and the
mean?
other
So
thing is
we don't
that
know that.
just because someone hasn't done it doesn't mean you can't.
Right.
Sure.
And you train with the best, for several years, maybe that's a good thing.
Well,
Mhm.
I don't I'm not saying it's just an automatic disqualifier. All my point was is Acho's video was weird. The thing in the car, I don't know what he was talking about.
yeah.
But the McCoy points McCoy was making, if you get past the brashness of it and all of that, those are kind of the questions I was raising a little bit. It's
Right.
he's never called plays. He's
Sure.
interviewed a billion times, never been selected. Why is that? I mean, he had Patrick Mahomes, who's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer.
Hmm.
Tariq Hill had him. Tariq Hill doesn't have any room to talk about anybody. By the way, he's a total slime ball. If those of you who don't know, he punched his pregnant girlfriend in the stomach, and threatened her. So I have no
And
use
broke
for,
his kid's arm too.
yeah, I have no
Yeah.
use for Tyreek Hill as a human being. But regardless, those are questions. Now I think it's far more positive than negative for Washington, because again, name a person in the building who's a winner.
Right.
Not one.
Right.
Even Ron Rivera kind of got lucky a couple years because he had Cam Newton there. Ron Rivera
Yeah.
doesn't have that great a track record.
No.
Newsflash.
He
Right.
has a ring from 1986. That's
Yeah, when he was
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, Eric Bieniemy has been around winners his entire career.
Right.
Right.
I look. My thing about first off, I think we get very hung up in you're the OC, you have to do this, this, and this. Because Scott Turner was the OC in the style of his primary gig was just calling plays. And let's be honest, there's other aspects of the job. We don't know all those aspects because we're not in the room, but there's a lot of nuance to being an offensive coordinator that it seems like Scott Turner probably sucked at because the offense was always really bad. And everyone's
Right.
like, well, but he's got these great play designs. And I didn't see it. I didn't agree his play designs were anything special. But I, I realize Bieniemy's never called plays on his own necessarily. Andy Reid has always been kind of a collaborative, like, hey, Eric, you give me like a good run here. That's what he does as a coach. I'm assuming that's what Bieniemy will do, where he will look to his receivers coaches and his quarterback coaches to help him figure out a good passing game each week. He will look
Mhm.
to his running backs coaches and his O-line coaches to help figure out what to do each week because that's what actually coordinating an offense should be.
Right.
It's not me it's not the Madden mode of I'm just sitting here pressing, we're going this play and that's the plan.
Well, I guess your point is there's a lot more to it than like the basic fans would know. This is
Right.
where I want to get into with Dave because probably better than Alex and I the specific types of things that I think the fans can expect to see from an Eric Bieniemy offense.
Right. Because you've been in
Oh,
Philly. Those Andy Reid offenses.
well, like I wrote in the article, I mean, over his 5 years there, which is typical for an Andy Reid offense. I mean, they lean more towards the pass at a 62% rate.
Yeah.
So they are more pass heavy, but in that passing game, just like Andy Reid's offense here in Philadelphia, you see it in Kansas City, and you actually saw in the Super Bowl, everything is predicated off of, a lot of intermediate routes with, with a lot of trips, formations, movement along the line, and redirections and everything. And that's why I mentioned the article how tight end is so vital in this offense. Because it's all about getting that tight end isolated on the best matchup you have. And if you can't get that matchup, that's where you have that screen game that comes into play. The RPO, if we stick with Sam Howell, potentially can be pretty effective as well. So all that's more of an extension off the run, especially with your screens to your receivers and your running backs. I mean, you're sitting there throwing like 3 to 5 yard routes to your tight ends. I mean, they're pretty much simple little dump offs and everything. And what that does, and how Tyreek Hill always flourished, and even without Tyreek Hill, they still had the deep game that was as good as anybody. In fact, I think there was a stat saying that Patrick Mahomes threw more deep balls this year than he has in the last like 2 years. I think 3 years ago, where him and Tyreek Hill had that one big year where he had like 54 touchdowns. But either way, it's so when you take away the tight end and you come down and you bring the safety in to take out the intermediate routes and you roll your linebackers out to take out your screen game, what does that now open up?
Isn't this just the Chiefs playing to their talent?
Absolutely. That's exactly what they're doing.
What I think the fans could look forward to Bieniemy most is he does strike me as the type that, if the Chiefs are any example, that can figure out how to best use the talent, because that's really fundamentally that's what Washington's done really poorly.
Yeah. Right, and if they can find a way to get that tight end, you're not going to get Kelsey, but if you get a tight end in there, and because they have Gibson, you might see Jerick McKinnon coming over here because he's going to be a free agent. That screen game is going to be effective. The 3 receivers that we have to open up that field, stretch that field, I mean, they have the talent to do,
Well, now, one thing that Emmanuel Acho said that did make sense in that weird car video was that the quarterback is not an upgrade.
Sure.
Bieniemy is making a lateral move no matter what spin you want. It's a lateral move. The other thing is going from Patrick Mahomes to Sam Howell. I mean, there's no telling how that's going to go. So I don't know if. I think it'll be more important than ever for the new offensive coordinator to be able to tailor the offense to the strengths of the team, because you don't know if Sam Howell can actually play.
And see, the thing in his defense, going from Patrick Mahomes to any of the other 31 teams is technically a drop down.
Of course.
Even Aaron Rodgers is not as good as Patrick Mahomes.
I would take Rodgers over Mahomes, but that's me.
And see, and this is where I have the issue with Acho. And it's kind of twofold with this one, because you go, I mean, just one in general, in terms of, minority getting head coaching opportunities. We hear all the stories. We understand that it's a stain on the NFL because they're just not being hired at a rate that fans, players, and the league would like to see. Whatever reason that is, whether it is deep rooted with racism, or if it is because maybe they're just not interviewing well, whatever it is, because we're not in the rooms. We don't know these owners personally. We're not in the rooms for these interviews, so we don't know what's going on. So Acho talks about, well, it's been so long, he should have been a head coach like 2 years ago. And he's right. He's right about that. And it's a disgrace in the NFL that he's not at least given that opportunity. I mean,
maybe he isn't good enough.
Well, maybe possible.
Maybe they know that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the big question I have.
There's a lot of really, really crappy head coaches that have gotten hired in the last few years.
Oh yeah,
also rehired in the last couple of years.
Zorn, Jim.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean that's going back a ways now, but yeah, like look, it's a sea of Jim Zorns in the NFL coaching circles.
Absolutely.
And so he hasn't gotten that opportunity for whatever reason it is. I mean, so Bieniemy made a decision because Kansas City, there was a report out there that said Kansas City wanted Bieniemy back. So Bieniemy made this decision to not even think about an offer from Kansas City, and he wanted to move on. He wanted to move on, one, to get out of under Andy Reid's shadow, to show the league he can navigate or build and navigate his own offense, develop his own quarterback. And he has that opportunity in Washington. Is Washington the best of places to go as an organization? Well, I think we all know that answer. Of course not. I mean, just whatever. But he's given an opportunity to sit there and show the league, here's what I can do. And let's be honest, if he just takes this offense and makes it into a top 20 offense, not top 10, not top 15, not top 10, just a consistent top 20 offense, and they can consistently produce decently, I mean, they're going to look at that as a miracle.
I mean,
look at what we're talking about here. We're talking about Washington here.
They haven't been in the top 20s for 4 years. So.
Yeah, it's just the point that this organization has had so many outs
up to the bottom lower end of average.
Well, see,
you will be a hero.
I say that because this organization, no matter what they do on the field, there's always outside distractions from the owner, from whatever it is that's constantly taken away from the game. And that has to affect the locker room.
I've written like 100 columns on this.
Yeah. And that affects the field on the play on the field, everything. I mean, granted, I'm exaggerating by top 20. He's going to have to do a little better.
It just sounded funny. That's all. It's like he's going to be a hero if he can get anywhere in the top 20.
I mean, yeah, but that was more of a dig at the organization because of how terrible they've been.
Yeah.
So it's just but
it begs the question. All of this, wants a fresh start, all that. I get it, but how do you end up with a team that the head coach is going into his 4th year and the owners may or may not sell? It's just not an ideal situation.
It is not an ideal situation, and partly it's bad luck on his part in a weird way because his team won the Super Bowl. Most of those OC jobs got filled up. Half the OC jobs changed this offseason, which is crazy. I think it's exactly 16 teams have new offensive coordinators. By the time Bieniemy came out, it was down to basically Washington and Baltimore for him, and Baltimore had already found their guy that day. That was it. He really didn't have a lot of options here.
Now, we can always put on the little tinfoil hat here and just say, maybe, just remember how Sean Payton had said that while a prospective owner came in for Washington and said, listen, if I buy the team, I want to bring in here. He was unabated by answering that or making that statement. Maybe there's a situation where, let's just say Josh Harris made contact with Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera is like, hey, listen, I want 1 more year if you buy this team. But I'd like to bring someone in like Bieniemy to maybe hand the reins over if he deserves it. And maybe, hey, I'm all aboard with that. And maybe Bieniemy knows that. That's just a way out left field. You never know.
I mean, that seems a little overly optimistic for my part, even to me, even.
That's why I said tinfoil hatch.
That's tinfoil, all right.
Look, I think he knows this is probably a 1-year deal for him, no matter what. But he just needs 1 season to prove that he can do more than people think. If that's really what's holding him back, I think there's a lot of things that are actually holding him back. Race may be a factor. The fact that you're an RB coach is a big factor. Running backs coaches do not get these jobs anymore. The fact that you are 50-something years old and the league is trying to hire 30-year-olds to be head coaches right and left doesn't help him. There's a lot of little things that are going against him these days. Yep. And not his fault on any of that, obviously.
No.
But, the trend is to trend away from guys like Bieniemy.
The other thing I think it'd not be fair to not mention is that he does have a past. I mentioned this in my column. He's been arrested a number of times. for drunk driving, failure to appear at a traffic
Right.
violation hearing, threatening a parking attendant, I think it was. But all these things happened when he was in his early 20s in the
Right.
late 80s, early 90s. And since that time, there hasn't been a publicly known, at least, there has not been a problem. So I mean, look, it's, he's not a school teacher here. The NFL is full of people who've had these kind of problems. So it's an issue, but I don't think that it really matters that much in the NFL, considering the type of people you're coaching.
Right.
So I just wanted to throw it out there so people know.
Yeah.
I tend to discount it as a relevant factor. When
Look,
he's been clean for
I'm not
30
going to
years.
say drug driving's okay, but like in the scale of terrible things NFL players have done, that's like a 2 out of 10.
Also, I mean, he didn't kill anybody. It wasn't an accident. He got stopped.
Right.
He was convicted. And again, all this happened 30 years ago, and there hasn't been a thing that happened since. So I don't think I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to mention it.
But it's worth mentioning.
Now, the one thing that I want to shift to a little bit is with Sam Howell, is I think a lot of people are getting too hung up on his 2021 year.
Which really sucked, Dave.
It did. It really sucked. Absolutely. Now, what that kind of now, if you roll back just one more year in the 2020 year, I mean, he had NFL caliber talent around him. He had two 1,000-yard running backs. He had the best deep ball threat in Bieniemy Brown. He had the talent around him, and when he had that talent, he was efficient. He was good. He was accurate. And ball placement, everything was there, and he was a mobile guy, so he was able to run the ball. Now, what the following year shows that maybe he's not that guy where he's going to be, well, I'm going to put the team on my back with no talent. I'm going to take you to the championship. Okay, that's fine. Maybe he's not that guy. But in 2020, he did show you put the talent around him, he can be more than just a competent quarterback in the right system. And in this system that he's going to play in, where the RPO is going to be involved, is going to be an intermediate game, a lot of screens and so forth. It's a system that's kind of tailored to what he can do, and he's already got the receivers in place. The running backs, I mean, they're decent. I mean, Antonio Gibson's good as a receiver out of the backfield, but they got to fix that interior offensive line. We know that. I mean, it's just absolutely horrendous. If they don't fix that, none of this matters anyway, in my opinion. But as far as a skill position talent, that's why I harp so much on the tight end. They got to get a tight end here that can run this offense. The talent's going to be around Sam Howell to give him the opportunity to succeed. And I think a lot of people harp too much on that 2021 year because he had one receiver that's probably going to Downs, I think his name is. I think he's rated one of the top 5 receivers in this draft this year.
We're gonna get to that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
Show.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's all he had in 2021. That was it. He was the second leading rusher on that team in 2021. And their leading rusher, I think, just barely cracked 1,000. Was like roughly around there, maybe. I mean, there was no talent on that team. They all went into the draft the year before. It's just, I don't think enough people take that in consideration either.
Dave's officially on the Sam Howell Homer fan train.
Well,
man.
If we're talking about, what they're going to do with his offense, the big question for me still going with Bieniemy is you are now going from you were an Air Coryell team under Scott Turner back to being a West Coast team, which this team was kind of that under Gruden and under Zorn and Shanahan. They kind of ran a lot of West Coast stuff. Less so, I think, than people realize. And I know it doesn't matter as much as it did maybe 15, 20 years ago what, your philosophy was. But there's going to be totally different terminology, I think it's safe to say. There's going to be a lot of different style of play now. So I will be fascinated in that aspect of, like, how are you merging these two things where, we were talking about at the beginning. You're coming from Andy Reid, who's the most pass-heavy coach in the NFL over the last 20 years. And Ron wants to run the ball. We know that philosophically, now they're backpedaling on that You guys may have not heard about that kind of stuff, but it seems like the front office now that Bieniemy's here is like, no, it was just more of a like we want to be that mindset of being tough.
I said weeks ago I didn't believe it anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
but
it made no sense to say that. So
no. And fine, whatever.
It
Backtrack
also
all you
doesn't
want.
make any sense to commit to Sam Howell in January. I think they're saying that because they know he's going to be the only one on the roster. Yeah, we believe in our guy.
Probably.
But if, somebody shows up to, don't believe they won't sign him,
I just will be very interested in those things. I don't get a feel for, or I don't know if I have a good feel for, like, what kind of team will Eric Bieniemy really want to be? Will he want to be a zone run team? Will he want to be a power run team?
The strength of his, though. Like I said earlier, he strikes me a lot of these coordinators. You know what they are,
right?
You know what they are, and I don't know. Eric Bieniemy strikes me as the type who, as I said in the beginning, seems to be pretty good at tailoring the offense to the strengths of the team, and that's what you would want. I mean, he probably has a play calling philosophy, whatever West Coast or whatever, but what I think it remains to be seen what he can develop, and that's a good thing.
Yeah,
maybe Sam Howell will work well with them. It'd be great if Washington could find a quarterback for that they're not paying any money to.
It sure would. I
don't know if I believe it, but
the good coordinators and coaches definitely do that. Obviously, Joe Gibbs was a legend for doing it, for adjusting what you do to your players, not trying to do the Bill Walsh thing, which is build a scheme and get players who fit your system, and both can work. But like if you're going to do one or the other, you have to really be good at it. I know we probably want to talk more about Bieniemy and all this stuff, but do you want to hit up the draft preview since we were talking about receivers?
Run through this. Yeah, we're at 36 minutes here, so we got to run through some stuff.
Let's run through those, and we'll hop back on the Bieniemy stuff.
Yeah, so we've got to cover free agent corners and what's his stage name? No one from Tampa, if you're listening, I'm sorry I forgot to invite you.
Yeah.
Apologize. But so we're going to run through that list. And we also need to start our draft coverage starting today. So we have receivers here up first. And incidentally, I realized we did cover Clint. No one from Tampa did cover edge rushers, if I believe. But anyway, so receivers. Okay, so I didn't specifically rank them this time like I usually do. I just have tiers. So the top tiers of receivers: Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. Najiba, maybe from Ohio State. So Quentin Johnson, 6'4", 212 in TCU. This dude, he's a freak of nature. Think Terrell Owens kind of freak of nature. Size, speed, classic X receiver, prototypical number one guy. The downside is with TCU, not quite a great program, but the dude has it all.
They did make the national championship.
I know, but it's not.
I know.
What kind of competition. But point is, I think to me there's a strong difference of opinion between these three guys. Who's number one? To me, this guy's number one because he's the mix of he's got it all. Size. He's a burner apparently. So that's Quentin Johnson. I tell you, I'll just run through the tiers. You guys can comment, and let's just run through it real quickly.
Sure.
Jordan Addison.
All first rounders is what you're saying?
Yeah, well, kind of, yes. Jordan Addison, 6 foot, 175 from USC, played 2 years at Pitt, transferred to USC under the NCAA's, bribery rules with the NIL and all that stuff. Consensus All-American, a little smaller, doesn't necessarily have top end speed, but a lot of people think he's the best pure receiver, in the class because he's got elite receiving skills. He can separate, and so he's another top end, solid first round. Jackson Smith, I don't know how to pronounce them. NJIGBA, and it also makes you almost say a word you don't want to say. So that guy, let's just call him Jackson. Okay, 6 foot, 198, another true junior, obviously Ohio State, third team All-American. His problem was he only played 3 games last year, hamstring injury, kept set out nearly the entire season. Quality hands, outstanding route runner. good ability to separate another guy without elite speed. So I would rank him a little lower than those other two guys, but that is the top tier. I certainly don't think Washington will end up with any of them.
No. Washington would be negligent if they drafted a wide receiver early this year.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll move on here. Not too many comments. Second tier, a handful of folks here. Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, 6 foot 175, another junior, 3 years. The negative again. He was a unanimous All-American, won the Blitnikoff Award, all that. Great. He's a slot guy, prototypical slot guy, fast, elusive, athletic, build wise. His negatives, Tennessee plays very spread out offense, so it's not quite the NFL. It needs to work on his route tree, but highly rated. Most people look at him as low for round 1, maybe round 2. Zay Flowers, Boston College, 5'10", 172. Another small guy, slot guy, dynamic, highly productive, small, criticized for his hands. Another slot receiver, but think like second round. Kayshon Boutte, LSU, true junior. He small, but he has played some outside. He's known as like a vertical threat, elite speed, elite cutting ability, great after the catch. Wasn't really an X receiver, but did play outside in the Z-Sum. So second, third round talent. Now here's the guy next that Dave mentioned. It was Josh Downs, North Carolina, 5'10", 170. So small. Now, the 140 time I saw with him was 4.47 as a junior, but some people think this guy's a burner. Like he's going to run way faster than that. So it's hard to tell since we haven't had combine yet. 42-inch vertical leap, which is NFL shooting guard kind of jumping ability. Highly productive, capable of running the entire route tree. I've seen him anything from first round to lower second round ratings, but he's a bit small, kind of limited to the slot, so that's why I put him in this group. So that's second tier. Comments?
That could be wound up a replacement for Curtis Samuels if he falls far enough. But then again, I don't think we draft a receiver any earlier than the 4th round, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think Washington would be negligent, as Alex said, to draft a receiver. Yeah. That's crazy.
I mean, I know you were doing the rookies right now, or the prospects. Yeah. I've been working on the one about free agency, and I mean, Washington's top 4 receivers are more or less set. That's the problem. We
got to cover it, We're not saying
I know.
Happen, but.
I understand. The only guy they're going to lose is Cam Sims this year.
And maybe they won't even lose him. I like Cam, but
I'm a huge Cam fan.
Yeah.
But I could understand if they decide they maybe want to get another young, like if they're going to draft somebody, that's who they need to look to replace is their big man. All our receivers are short. That's our one drawback at receiver right now. So
yeah. Okay. So the third tier, and I stopped at this tier here because there's a million receivers out there, but these are just sort of the top guys to watch out for. Nathaniel Tank Dell from University of Houston, 5'10", 155. So he's wee. As Alex would say, he's wee.
Yes. Also, how's his name Tank?
When he's 5'10", 155, I don't know. It seems like a bit of an oxymoron to call a guy who's 155 pounds a tank, but that is apparently his nickname. Again, another dude who's highly productive. Most of these guys are juniors. This guy has been playing for football for 5 years, so he's an old man at this point. He was at Alabama A&M. He transferred to a community college.
So he's a Sherman tank is what he is.
Maybe, yeah. And he played 3 years at the University of Houston. 35 games, so he's very, very, very experienced. Again, this guy is explosive playmaker. Think slot guy. Think downfield vertical threat. The downside, again, other than his size, he's playing at U of H, wide open spread offense. Not exactly a bastion of complicated route running. Here's Alex's big guy, Rashee Rice, SMU, 4-year player, senior. There's a bit of dispute about his height. I've seen him listed anywhere from 6 foot and a half an inch to 6'3", so somewhere in there. We'll find out in the combine. But bigger dude.
A rather huge disparity there.
Very big. So I was a bit surprised because again the combine hadn't happened. So who knows? We'll find out. But good route runner, good ball skills. Um, some of the scouts think that he's going to have a bit of a learning curve in the NFL, so that's why I put him in the third
Well, if
tier.
he's at SMU, he's probably playing in another spread offense.
He is. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Are any elite receivers not playing in a spread offense coming out of college?
It's college
anymore?
football, man. I mean,
Yeah.
most of them. Last guy here we're going to cover for this, Marvin Mims, 5'11", from 177 from Oklahoma. Another true junior, first team All Big 12 selection. Another explosive playmaker, deep ball, vertical threat. Third round value by most, because he's a vertical threat, not the greatest route runner in the world by NFL standards, but 5'11", 177. That size, you could be in the slot, but could maybe put him in as a Z too, so he's a bit more versatile, and played a little bit, in a bigger program than some of these guys. SMU, Houston, Oklahoma's playing at a very high level. So that is the top 10 receivers.
Okay.
Briefly, I don't think Washington's going to end up with any of them.
No, Washington should not be looking at receiver early in the draft. I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah.
Getting one late, you need special teams guys. You need some depth. I wouldn't get upset if they're drafting one or two in the 6th, 7th rounds. I don't
think
care.
When you get back to that, I think you just draft the best player. In the past couple rounds, I mean, don't stress.
Right. But yeah, I mean that. I know we're doing it to get it out of the way.
That's why I put it up front. There is thought into the way I do this.
Right. That's why you're having me write the receivers one fairly early too. The free agent one.
No, it's because I trust your writing the most.
Steve is lying.
Okay, and since I forgot to invite no one from Tampa, we're also going to run through his free agent corner list here real fast.
List of free agent corners. All right.
This will be published probably tomorrow, depending on how I feel, either tomorrow or Thursday or Friday.
Right.
And so he's listed some of the top free agent cornerbacks. Now, the issue with Washington is they have a very expensive dude, Kendall Fuller. What do they do with him? Some fans want him cut. We'll see. So here's the top corners. Jamel Dean, Buccaneers. James Bradbury at the Eagles. Jonathan Jones, Marcus Peters, Emmanuel Mosley, Eli Apple, Trey Flowers, Rock Yassin with the Raiders. All these guys are $10 million and up. Raise your hand if you think Washington's going to spend that much money on a free agent corner.
I don't see a lot of hands up.
Yeah, exactly right. Patrick Peterson's in there, obviously Hall of Famer. He's old though at this point, so he's not commanding quite as many. Now, what no one from Tampa's recommendation is in his column rather is, he says, and I agree with him, he doesn't think Washington's going to go for any of these big name free agent corners like we just said.
Right.
So I think they're just going to stick with Kendall Fuller.
I think their plan is to stick with Fuller and Benjamin St-Juste. I think they desperately need a good third corner because they've got these guys, Danny Johnsons and whoever else behind them, Wild Goose. They're just guys. I know fans get into certain players. None of these guys would you ever be comfortable starting them 16, 17 games. Let's say Fuller gets injured in training camp. You don't want that, right? They need a third solid corner and someone who knows how to play the slot. I mean, Fuller used to. He can't anymore for whatever reason.
I don't know how good he ever was at it, though. I mean, the Chiefs tried it and didn't work, and there's a reason the Chiefs let him go. I think there's a bit of homerism with Kendall Fuller involved, which is the fans tend to think he's maybe better than he is. Maybe not now. The rose might be rubbed off a little bit, but in the first couple of years, I think he got some benefit of just being like a Washington dude.
I mean, I think he's okay. I don't think he's a world beater, but. I don't think he's Pro Bowl caliber, and he's probably not worth what they're paying him.
No.
But, yeah.
And I think they addressed that corner spot through the draft. I think that's one of the early picks in this draft.
I wouldn't be surprised by that.
In fact, if it wasn't for Bieniemy coming, I would almost think that a corner would have been a first-round pick.
I think
right now.
Understand that, I mean, in the mock draft, we have a mock draft column every week, and this is what the mock drafts are showing. They agree with you, but why on earth would they not draft offensive line? I don't get it.
Well, I think offensive line. The only way they'll do offensive line is if one of those two top tackles are there on the board.
Harris, what's his
Because
name?
Yeah.
you got Paris and Brute something from Georgia, and from what most people talk about, after those top two, the tackles really drop, and you're not going to take a center or a guard in the first round, most likely. So that leaves you with a corner, and the
Yeah.
corner class is pretty deep on the top end. Well, not real deep. It's like about what, 3 or 4 deep, really.
I think it's a little. So I saw somebody today saying it was probably double that, but
maybe, yeah.
They need to move heaven and earth to fix their offensive line, or none of this matters.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I made a pitch earlier in the year before Bieniemy was even in the conversation that they move up for someone like Paris Johnson. Because I think that would be an absolute brilliant move to do it. They were able to jump up to get him. I don't care what the draft capital would be to do that, because that guy is just, you can almost say he's Trent Williams all over again. That's how good he is. He's athletic.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Wait. Say that one more time, just for the record, so we're clear.
Yeah, he's almost at that level of a Trent Williams. That's how. He's athletic. He's quick. He's fast off the line.
That's bold.
He blocks downfield. Everything. Everything about his profile screams a 10-year locked-in left tackle. Period. And
the one problem I have with that, left tackle's not the biggest issue on this line.
It's an issue, though.
It's an issue. Look, you could replace all 5 guys.
They need all of them. Honestly, they need all of them.
Yeah.
Chase Ruiz is the only one I wouldn't replace, and he's been hurt repeatedly.
I would actually be very okay if they said we need to find a center who can play more than 4 games a year.
But he's the only one from a play perspective when he's on the field that I would trust would be him. All the rest of them can go, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think anyone's not replaceable. I'll agree with you.
Right.
I'm okay with let's give Sam Cosmi more time. I'm okay. I understand liking Chase Rourier because he is talented when he's healthy, but like you said, they could all be replaced. I'm okay with that. It's just left tackle. To me, the worst need is they need a guard, then a center, then you can talk tackles.
I don't know. I kind of believe in a strong left tackle. And for those of you out there who are still Washington fans, the history of
of course
this team and elite left tackles, and it means a lot. And they don't have that.
And actually, good guards are typically found in the mid rounds when you get the more of the undersized tackles. And they take them, like the from North Dakota State, this guy Mauch, Mauch, I think his name is. The guy who wrote my article.
Yeah,
he's an ideal guy. About this. Yeah. He's an ideal guy to kick to the inside. So if they were to draft him late and bring in Samelu or whatever from Philadelphia, throw him on the right hand side for the guard. I think right there they got a really good direction right there, and you can. Already your offensive line is almost night and day better right there.
There's not a ton of great guards in the free agent class. There's a couple. A lot of guys are getting a little too long in the tooth, so there could be some stopgaps. Hey, since we're already at 53, do we have any things about corner, or can we jump back into the Bieniemy? And
no, I just wanted to real quick go through it, which we did. And you can read about this. These columns will be up this week.
Right.
It won't be up by the time this is released, but it'll be up probably Thursday afternoon.
Sure. All right. So to jump back to the coaching staff stuff, some news we got to throw out there. Drew Terrell, who was the wide receivers coach, he's left the team. Jim Hostler has left the team, who was kind of like an offensive, not quality control, but he was just like a general assistant on the offensive side.
Get my coffee, boy.
Yeah. Well, I think it was more than that because he's like an old man.
Get my coffee, old man.
But so the team has brought in Greg Lewis, who was the running backs coach with Bieniemy in Kansas City. But before he was a running backs coach, he's been a receivers coach most of his career. That's probably the guy who's going to replace Terrell there. And then apparently are also interviewing a former offensive coordinator from Stanford, Pritchard. Tavita Pritchard. I don't watch a lot of Pac-10 or Pac whatever number they're going to use football. So
Pac-52.
Yeah, Pac-52.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do they have East Coast teams yet in the Pac? I know.
They do not yet, but
okay.
Just give it time. The Southeast, the SEC is gonna, have teams in the North here soon, so you might as well have East Coast teams in the Pac-12.
The Big Ten is coast to coast now, so why not? But yeah, so these are interesting moves. I think bringing in an OC like this, who was a former quarterback, probably makes sense for Bieniemy, somebody who might be able to help him develop a passing scheme, since that's probably not his thing, just based on his background. And then, Lewis is just, somebody he trusts, so that makes sense. But I wanted to at least we should at least put that stuff out there before we end the show.
Well, it should be stated that I believe Bieniemy has control over his coaches. I think that was the business.
He has full
deal
control over everything. Yes.
Right.
Full autonomy offensively. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Before we finish, there was a story that came out of something that the NFL's doing with Netflix. I don't know if either of you saw it.
I did not.
Yes, I did.
Okay, Steve, I don't know if you have Netflix yet. I know you are.
I do have Netflix. It comes with my Xfinity service. It's built into it.
Okay, so I think you'll like this show. They apparently, it's in the Hard Knocks vein. They followed around 3 quarterbacks for the entire 2022 season. And so it's like a documentary about 3 quarterbacks for the 22 season. We've got Marcus Mariota, we've got Kirk Cousins, and Patrick Mahomes. And you get to just see the roller coaster of their season in documentary style.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah. Right? That's a decent concept for a show right there.
Yep.
Don't you kind of wonder what Kirk Cousins does in his off time? Is he sitting around
it's make terrible steaks and say golly gee a lot. That's what I think.
Well, yeah.
He can't barbecue very well.
I don't know. I can't barbecue either. I can't criticize him for that, but he's just kind of a weird guy.
Right.
So I don't. Marcus Mariota strikes me as boring as watching.
That one will be fascinating because of the struggle that a former star turned journeyman now and barely hanging on to a starting job. That to me is almost more fascinating than watching Patrick Mahomes, who's just great at everything.
Well, and Patrick Mahomes is interesting because he's got his idiotic brother and the wife is a loudmouth and all of that is
stuff will be interesting. Yes.
Yeah. And
how does the wife is tune out that train wreck to be the best player?
I don't know. Well, I mean, he's used to this though. I mean, don't forget Patrick Mahomes' background, which is the son of a professional baseball player. So he's been around this for a long time.
True. Yep. He's not he doesn't know anything but being in the limelight in a way.
It's for those of you who are Washington fans, I know that you would like to see this kind of thing for this team, but it's the worst idea ever. It's the worst idea in the history of ideas. You do not want cameras inside the building in Washington as long as Dan Snyder is the owner.
No.
That's a horrible idea.
Oh, as fans, no, but media, they would love it.
Oh, yeah, but the team shouldn't want it. The fans shouldn't want it. It would go horribly. It's like things sure to go horribly wrong.
Yeah. The Schadenfreude part of me would love it. I'll admit that.
Well, the other thing is that Washington's almost the least popular team in the league.
Oh yeah.
And so there's no ratings there.
They also they haven't had a quarterback to do this with in 10 years. The whole point of the show is to follow quarterbacks. Who are you going to follow in Washington?
When they have 3 quarterbacks a year for every year for 30 years.
Right.
It's only a little frustrating.
It is.
Not to me. Not anymore.
Hey, we got our answer in Sam Howell, right?
I admire the homerish optimism. I really do. I just find it a bit fascinating. That's all.
He could be terrible. It would be a win if they could just have a quarterback start all 17 games for a season. That's one season.
A bit too much to ask for Washington.
We have not seen a quarterback start a full season since Kirk Cousins left.
Is that the time? And then before that, it'd probably be Jason Campbell, right?
Yep, it was.
And then before that,
Brad Johnson, maybe?
Did
I
he
don't
play
even
the
know
whole
if Brad
year?
Johnson did.
Yeah,
I'd have to
99, right?
I'd have to look.
Okay, we're gonna hold on a
It might be
minute.
99. You might be right.
Before we can't sign off yet, we're gonna look this up. Brad, we're gonna see
Who can get it first? Who can get it first?
Well, I can get Brad Johnson. No.
Nope. Rodney Pete's. Well, he didn't start. No, Brad Johnson started all 16. So you're right. 99. Rodney Pete played in 3 games.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He threw 17 passes.
So there you go. So just think about this. What's his name? Aaron Rodgers came to Green Bay, I think, in '92, I believe.
No. 2002.
Yeah, he came much later than that.
92 would have been maybe Brett Favre that you're thinking of.
Yeah.
What did I say? That's what I meant. I meant Brett Favre.
Yes.
What
did
I say?
Okay.
I didn't.
Aaron Rodgers came to Green Bay
I
in
meant
92.
Brett Favre. What I was trying to get at is that Green Bay's had 2 quarterbacks for the past 30 years. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
They had Brett Favre was 92 through something, and then Aaron Rodgers. After that, they've had, and there might have been 1 or 2 like Brett Favre had that huge streak of consecutive games started.
Right.
But there's probably been a couple players who played here and there, but mainly they've played literally 2 guys for 30 years. Washington hasn't even had less than 2 guys in a season.
Right.
For 30 years.
For the most part, you're right.
Yeah.
I think Jason Campbell had 2.
Right.
Kirk had 3 seasons, or maybe it was 2.5. Brad had 1.
Just think of that, though.
Yeah.
Oh, in this column on the left-hand side of the page, we have Brett Favre and Rodgers. On the right side of the column, we have a list of about 25 people.
Oh, it's more than that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm making a number up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a depressing number.
Yeah, but we had Sexy Rexy, though.
Yeah, we did.
Packers didn't have Sexy Rexy.
They're probably better off for it.
The Packers had Matt Hasselbeck as their 3rd stringer. We had to start Matt Hasselbeck's like semi-idiot brother for like 3 games.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the year that who's the guy from Florida, the coach from Florida,
Spurrier.
Where we had Whirlpool and
I mean,
was it Danny Johnson? No, who was the other guy?
Wasn't Danny Johnson?
Matthews.
Yeah.
Shane Matthews.
Shane Matthews. There you go.
Those 2 guys. I mean, man.
And remember, he gave them jersey 7 and 9, and he didn't even know that was a thing.
I think what we need to do is come up with a giant crossword puzzle.
Right.
And just the names of Redskins quarterbacks since Joe Theismann retired.
Oh, we could do that. It would take a little while, but we could definitely do that.
Can we do that? Is there software that can create a crossword puzzle?
I mean, technically, Steve, just use an Excel document and you could do it.
Yeah, but I have to think though. I just want to input the names and just have it
automatically. No, I don't know if anything like that.
I want to do that. Let's think about that, guys.
We'll look for something that can do it.
Redskins, just to have some fun. The Redskins quarterback crossword puzzle.
It had to be one of them super size
really
ones.
big.
Yeah.
Why is every question or hint? Oh my God! For the love of God, what are you doing? Stop it!
We could come up with some pretty cool hints. Like Kirk Cousins would be pretty easy. It'd be like Golly G or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we might do that as a gag. All right.
I think we need Sean Conti back to do something like that.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I think that wraps up the show. Let's wrap it up on something fun.
Exactly.
There you go.
Okay, we will be back next week. What groups are we talking about, Steve? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I have it open. So it is for free agency. It is going to be quarterback. Oh God, I got to do another one. Quarterbacks, free agents, quarterbacks, and then draft is. And we've got wide receivers and quarterbacks the same day because we had to mix them together because we ran out of time. So quarterbacks, wide receivers, and then draft is going to be safeties with Owen from Tampa.
Right. So I have all right, we're good. We'll be good.
Yeah, and I need to come up with quarterbacks between now and then, which I will because I'm good at this.
Yep. All right, guys. We will talk to you all next week. Later.
Take it easy. Later.